Good morning, students. Hope all of you are doing well. Let's enter the world of political science again with the quote of a famous political thinker, Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli was a Renaissance philosopher, and one of his greatest work was his book titled The Prince. In his book, while mentioning the traits of a leader or a traits of a prince, Machiavelli quoted that a prince must imitate both the fox and the lion, because the lion is unable to protect himself from the traps and the fox is also unable to frighten the wolves. One must therefore to be like a fox to recognize the traps and to be like a lion to frighten the wolves. Therefore, according to Machiavelli, a prince must possess two traits at least, or a leader must possess two traits at least. One is to be clever like fox, and second one is to be a brave like a lion. So in this context, let's move further. In my previous lectures, I taught you about the basic understanding of the word political science, definitions of the word political science. Then we move forward and try to understand the essence of class 11th NCERT book. What is the essence or what message the NCERT wants to convey to the students? I dictate you about this in my previous lecture. The essence behind this was very clear, that it became significant for a student initially to understand its politics of its own country, and then it provides the gateway for understanding the working model of the Indian Constitution. And now in this lecture, we will move further and try to get the syllabus of this book. In my previous lecture, I taught you till the 5th chapter. I gave you a brief description of the chapters that are included in the class 11, Constitution, why and how, rights in the Indian Constitution, election and representation, executive and the legislature. We had already discussed all of them. And I told you that before understanding all of these chapters, we will understand the Indian Constitution first. I will give you a brief introduction regarding to the Indian Constitution, that what are the parts in the Indian Constitution, what we meant by the preamble of the Indian Constitution, what are the schedules, and what we mean by the word article as well. After having a basic understanding of the Constitution, we will move further one by one to all of these chapters. So I dictate you in my last lecture about these, giving a brief introduction about these chapters, and let's move further toward the 6th chapter of the first book, Indian Constitution at Work. The 6th chapter is about the judiciary. Judiciary is one of the main organ of the Indian government or any government in this world. See, there are three main organs which have a horizontal division of power: the executive, legislature and the judiciary. Judiciary is one of the main important organ of the government. In this particular chapter, first of all we are going to understand what is judiciary, that definition of judiciary. If I define judiciary in simple terms, it basically means that a system of courts, which is defending the laws, or which are trying to defend or make the laws, or which are trying to interpret the laws, and which also tries to uphold the rule of law. These system of courts which defend the laws, or these system of courts which interpret the laws, or these system of courts which uphold the rule of law is known as judiciary. After understanding the basic definition of the judiciary, we will move further and try to understand the structure of the Indian judiciary. The Indian judiciary structure is a pyramidal structure. The apex court is the Supreme Court, then it comes to the high courts, and then to the district courts, and at the lowest level there are the subordinate courts. After understanding the structure, we will move further and have a bit in detail about the Supreme Court of the country, that how judges are appointed in the Supreme Court. There is a procedure and the rule of seniority when it comes to the appointment of the Chief Justice of India. And after the appointment of Chief Justice of India, other judges are appointed to the Supreme Court with the collegium system. What is the collegium system? How it gradually evolved in the Indian judiciary? We are going to understand all of these things. After understanding the appointment, we will understand how judges are removed in India. The judges of India can be removed when there is a misbehavior or a case of incapacity. There was also an unsuccessful attempt to remove a judge in India, because it is quite very much hard to remove a judge from his post. Then after understanding the removal of the judges, we will move further and try to understand the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. If I talk you about the jurisdiction, it simply means that what are the specific areas in which only Supreme Court can work. These areas are like original jurisdiction. When there is a dispute of center state or a state, then only a Supreme Court can solve or resolve these problems. Then there is the appellate jurisdiction. The Supreme Court is the highest court of appeal in the country. Then after appellate jurisdiction, there is the jurisdiction of writ jurisdiction, that whenever a fundamental right of any citizen is violated, then Supreme Court can issue some special writs to hold or to stop the violation of the fundamental right. Then it comes to the advisory jurisdiction. The Supreme Court is also empowered to advise the Prime Minister or to advise the President of the country. Specifically mentioned about the President of the country, but Prime Minister can also seek the advice of the Supreme Court by the channel of the President, by channels of the President. The Council of Ministers can seek the advice of the President, and President can seek the advice of the Supreme Court, CGI, or the judges of the Supreme Court. So it also have a advisory jurisdiction also. After understanding the advisory jurisdiction, we will come to the two concepts that are most important to understand in the judiciary. The first one is the judicial review, and second one is the judicial activism. Judicial review simply means when an aggrieved person comes to the court, then court have the power to declare any law which is unconstitutional or which are violating the fundamental rights, and it is formulated by the legislature. The court have the power to declare the law null and void. This is the concept behind the judicial review. But then comes the concept of the judicial activism. And what is the judicial activism? See, prior to 1979 or 1980, the concept was that when a person is himself a victim, then only the aggrieved person can reach to the court. But after that, this concept went and gradual changes, and it was decided that if someone is aggrieved and he or she is not able to come to the court or before the court, then other person on their behalf can file a PIL, and this PIL mechanism is known as judicial review. PIL simply means public interest litigation. So this is the concept of judicial activism. We will understand it in bit detail with some current cases as well. So after understanding judicial review, judicial activism, and why do we need judiciary, all of these points are included in this. First of all, I will dictate you or teach you about the simple definition of judiciary. Then we will move forward to check what is the need of the judiciary. Then the Supreme Court structure or the structure of Indian judiciary. After understanding the structure of Indian judiciary, we will move further to know the jurisdictions of Supreme Court. After understanding the jurisdictions of Supreme Court, we came towards or encountered the two concepts. The first concept is the judicial activism, and the second concept is the judicial review. Both of them are crucial to understand. Judicial review, and after understanding the judicial review and judicial activism, we will move further towards a landmark case of Keshwanand Bharti case. The Keshwanand Bharti case was a dispute between the parliament and the judiciary. Actually not the judiciary, but it was regarding to the interpretation of the constitution, what is the scope of parliament to change or amend the fundamental rights. All of these disputes are involved in the Keshwanand Bharti case, and we will see how the Keshwanand Bharti case proceeds and what were the judgments that were delivered by the judges in Keshwanand Bharti case, because it changes the concept of understanding the Indian constitution. So all of these are included in the chapter judiciary. After judiciary, we will move further to the chapter 7th, which is the federalism. The chapter federalism is also important to understand, because federalism word defines somewhere it is going to connote that forms of the government, which type or which levels of government are actually existing in India. When it comes to the formation of the government, we can have two key concepts. The first one is we can form a unitary government, which have only one level of the government, that is the central level of the government. And the second concept is the federal government. Federalism simply means that there is minimum two levels of the government, or there can be more, but minimum there must be two levels of the government, and both of these levels must be independent from each other, and both of them derive their powers from the constitution. So this is the basic understanding of the federalism, and India has also adopted the federalism. But remember, there is no word like federalism mentioned in the Indian constitution, because Indian constitution mentioned the word union, because India has some unitary elements in excess as compared to the federal elements. I will dictate you about the federalism of India and about the federalism of USA. There are major differences between the federalism of both the countries. And what are these differences? We will try to understand in this federalism. After dictating or having the information of the federalism definition, we will move further and try to understand the structure of Indian government. The first level is the union level government, the second level is the state level government, and after 1992 we also introduced the third tier government, which we are going to understand in the chapter 8, the local self government. So Indian federalism basically have three tier government, and all of these government derive their powers from the constitution. So this is the basic meaning of the federalism. After understanding these concept of the federalism, we will move further and try to understand, are there any disputes in the Indian federalism? So to give you a bit knowledge that are there any disputes? Yes, disputes arise in Indian federalism. There are many kinds of disputes, like sometimes there is a clashes between center and states regarding to any water sharing or any land disputes. Sometimes there are disputes between the state and state, which we can say the interstate disputes. Interstate disputes are also regarding to the river water sharing, or sometimes the land sharing, or it may be regarding to the mountains as well. So all of these disputes are arose in the federalism. Sometimes there are also disputes regarding to providing the autonomy to a region, like Punjab also have a movement of autonomy. In Northeast, if we look at the Manipur, if we look at the Nagaland, they are also going through, they went through many movements in which they want the autonomy. So autonomy is also one of the negative sides of the federalism, but we cannot completely say it as a negative side. But yes, to some extent it is a negative side for the Indian federalism, because we believe in the unity. Despite of having a diversity, we believe in unity in diversity. And then all of these disputes which are related to the federalism, we are going to discuss in the chapter federalism. So first of all, we'll understand the definition of the federalism. Then we will move forward to understand the structure of the Indian federalism, and then what Indian constitution mentions about the federalism. Then Indian constitution also divides the power in the government in three lists, which are mentioned in the 7th schedule. The first one is the union list, then second is the concurrent list, state list, and third one is the concurrent list. All of these powers are separately divided into different levels of the government. Then the criticism of the federalism on the disputes of the federalism, as I dictate you. So all of these things we are going to understand in the chapter federalism. Then comes the chapter local governments, or I can use another word, local self-governments. First of all, we will try to understand what is the concept behind the local self-government. What do we mean by the local self-government? The local self-government simply means the Panchayati Raj and the municipal corporation, or we termed it as a Nagarpalika. So Nagarpalika and the Panchayati Raj are included in the local self-governments. When the Indian constitution was implemented, the Indian constitution doesn't specifically mention about the local self-government. The local self-government were incorporated in the directive principles of the state policy. It was merely a direction given to the state. But state somehow does not implement it uniformly in the country. But when gradually after 20 to 30 years, there feels a need to implement the local self-government properly in the country. So many committees were formed, and committees present their reports before the government that we need a local self-government, or the third tier of the government in India as well. Then comes the question, why? Why do we need local self-government? Because it is said that we constituted the states according to the diversity of the country. But when we move further inside the states, move deeper inside the states, there is more and more diversity in the country. So it is said that according to that diversity, if we implement local self-governments, then a person who is local in his area, or the group of person who are local of that particular area, they probably know more how to utilize their resources. They probably get the chance to participate in the government rules, or chance to participate in the making the policies for the government. So having a basic understanding of the local area is, local people have a good understanding of the local area. That is why we need local self-government in this particular area. So they get the part to participate in the politics as well, and they get also a chance to develop their own areas. Like Panchayati Raj and Nagarpalika is providing opportunity to the local citizens to actively participate and develop their own particular area. So therefore we need the local self-government. And then how the growth of local self-government took place in India. When it comes to the ancient India, something like local self-government, we call it Sabha in Hindi, were introduced in the ancient India. Then in the medieval and modern India, when it comes to the modern India, Lord Ripon, the Viceroy of India, he introduced some kind of local self-government first time in India. And after that gradual process, we developed many of these kind of government. And after the independence and formulation of the constitution, we actually waited for the 30 to 40 years. But India conducted some experiments in Bihar, some in Rajasthan, but they were not a good experiment, or we can say that they were not a uniform experiment, because government was not bounded by the constitution to implement the local self-government. So some committees recommend to government that a government have to be bound, or it becomes have to make obligatory for the government to implement the local self-government rule. So how can we bound the government? By changing the constitution. Then in 1992, two amendments were bring to on the table of the parliament. The first one was the 73rd constitutional amendment, and second one was the 74th constitutional amendment. The 73rd constitutional amendment deals with the introducing of the Gram Panchayat at the village level, and the 74th constitutional amendment act deals with the implementation of municipal council or Nagar Palika at district level, so that they can manage properly the resources of the area, and they can look after the proper utilization of these resources as well as proper management of their own particular area. So both of these deals with the local self-government. We will understand in a bit detail about the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. After understanding the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, we will move further and try to understand how elections took place in local self-government, what is the State Election Commission, from where they borrow the money or the budget for running their own government, and what are the criticism of the local self-government as well, because many of the demands of the local self-government are still yet to be fulfilled by the state or the central government. And it actually has taken from 1992, if you look at to 2022, it is almost 30 years. But still there are many challenges for the local self-governments to develop themselves. What are these challenges? We are going to understand in this chapter. After understanding the local self-government, we'll move further and look at the constitution as a living document. A constitution as a living document. What we mean by this title? See, when we formulate a constitution and when we articulate a constitution, there came two concepts. One concept is that we formulate it in such a manner the constitution became the static, or we formulate it in such a manner the constitution became dynamic. There can be two key concepts. The first one is we formulate a constitution that is static, and the second is we formulate a constitution that is dynamic. What is a static constitution? The static constitution simply means after this formulation of the constitution, it is nearly impossible, or it is very rigid to change or amend the constitution. When the amendment is very rigid, or it is nearly impossible to change the constitution, these type of constitution are called as static constitution. But there is a problem in static constitution. What is the problem? The problem is that if we cannot amend the constitution according to the needs of the people, if we cannot amend the constitution according to the time of the constitution, because with the time the needs changes, with the time the aspiration of the people changes. If we cannot amend the constitution, then it is likely to damage, or it is likely to be replaced by the people. So the static constitution is not more favorable. If you look at the constitution of the USSR, United Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, it was nearly hard or impossible to change the constitution. That's why it is one of the reasons that the USSR collapsed in 1991. And the second concept is about the dynamic constitution. What do we mean by the dynamic constitution? It simply means that a constitution can be amended, but we have not made the amendment more flexible. There must be a balance of rigidity and flexibility for amending the constitution. The balance, why this balance is required? Because if the constitution is somehow up to some extent is rigid, then it can take up the old values along with it. And if the constitution to a somehow extent is flexible, then it can also embed new values, or new values can be incorporated in the constitution which meets the aspirations of the people. Therefore, it is favorable to form a dynamic constitution. And when we say that a living document, it simply means we are talking about the dynamic constitution. Because when the constitution is dynamic, it is the living document. If the constitution is static, then it is a dead document. So rather than formulating a dead document, we have to formulate a living document. And what are the things that Indian constitution have in both of them? Indian constitution is a dynamic constitution. The framers of the Indian constitution made the constitution dynamic. How? By the procedure of amendments. Indian constitution can be amended by three ways. The first way is the amendment can be brought, some amendments can be brought through a simple majority in the both houses of the parliament. The second way is if the amendments are like constitutional amendments are, then both the houses require the special majority. Second way. And the third way is the amendments which the amendments which are related to the federalism or division of the powers between the center and state government. The amendments like this can be introduced in the parliament. First of all, they both have to be passed by the parliament by majority, then it has to be ratified by almost 50% states in the country, then only it can be passed. So this is the procedure of amending the Indian constitution. Article 368 specifically mentioned about the special majority to amend the constitution and special majority plus 50% consent of the state. We will understand in a bit detail that how the amendment carries out in the Indian constitution. The first is the simple majority, second is the special majority, and third is the special majority plus 50% consent of the state. And remember that only parliament have the right, or only parliament is empowered to amend the constitution. No other institution is empowered to amend the constitution. Judiciary can only interpret the constitution, but it does not have the power to change or to amend the constitution. So that is why Indian constitution is said a living document. If you look at the Indian constitution, then we have amended it several times. For around 105 to 106 constitutional amendment had taken place till today. So why all these amendments are there? They are because of many reasons. First reason can be the changing political ideologies of the country. Second reason is to meet the aspirations of the people, to meet the desires of the people. So all of these reasons are behind changing the constitution. Because we changed the constitution and we actually changed, I mean to say we actually amended the constitution. That is why our constitution is dynamic and it is known as a living document. If there was no procedure of amendment, or the procedure of amendment was quite rigid in Indian constitution, then I think that constitution was more likely to be break under the pressure of the change. But it doesn't change, and we are following the same constitution but with some amendments. That's why we call our constitution as a dynamic constitution. So this is the concept behind this chapter, the constitution as a living document. Then comes the chapter 10, the philosophy of the constitution. What do we mean by the word philosophy? First of all, if I dictate you the word meaning, a literal meaning of the word philosophy is that love of wisdom. But if I define you, or in a broader sense, if I define you the term philosophy, it simply means the activity undertaken by some people to seek or to understand the fundamental truth of a particular field. To understand the fundamental truth, to understand the fundamental ideas, to understand the fundamental principles, to understand the fundamental morals behind the particular field. And this particular field is politics in this context. So when we apply the activity of philosophy to seek the truth or to understand the truth behind the politics or behind the Indian constitution, then it is known as the political philosophy of the constitution. So Indian constitution has a political philosophy or a set of ideas or some morals, some values that are embedded in the constitution, and according to which our framers want to shape the society of this nation. So this is the philosophy of the Indian constitution. Like if you look at the word democracy, this is the philosophy of the Indian constitution, that we want to make our society a democratic society. The philosophy of social justice, we want to deliver justice to each and every section of the society. Then if you move forward, then we have the word like republic. We want to form a society of republic. It simply means that there should be no privileged class in the country. All of them should be treated equal. The rule of law is also the philosophy behind our Indian constitution. Providing equality or formation of the egalitarian society is also a moral philosophy behind the Indian constitution. To protect the minority, to provide the rights to the minority, and the concept of secularism is also the political philosophy of the Indian constitution. So therefore, these are the truths, or these are the philosophy like secularism, democratic, socialism, providing justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. All of these are the political philosophy behind the Indian constitution, which our constitution framers want to shape the society according to these ideals. So we are going to understand these ideals in the chapter 10th, the philosophy of the constitution. So I think and I hope that all of you understand that what are we going to deal in these chapters, and I give you a bit or brief detail about all of these chapters, but in our ensuing classes I will explain them all in a detail. In my next class I will teach you about the political theory book, what we mean by the political theory and philosophy are related. I will teach you about what is the political theory, what do we mean by the political theory, and then after what are the political theory or what are the ideals that are provided in the Indian Constitution, and what are manners to understand these ideals in the Indian Constitution. So in the next class we will try to understand the political theory book and what chapters are included in that particular book. So for now, thank you.